This is our final installment of Strategies on Equity, our webinar series. And I just am really grateful to all of you all who've been with us and joined with us, and the presenters, especially panelists, who over these number of weeks have been so gracious to give us some of their time. It has been quite informative. In the coming weeks, we are pulling together a publication, if you will, an online publication that will share some of the issues and thoughts raised throughout our conversations and presentations. You'll have access to some of the presentations as well. And I would be remiss if not, again, appreciating our President and CEO, Beverly Robertson, who will be joining us and closing us out near the end, but appreciating her and her leadership. Thinking all of our panelists and those presenters who have been so gracious as it relates to their time. We're also extremely grateful for our Zoom sponsor, Southwest Tennessee Community College, and the sponsor of the series itself, our friends at Independent Bank. And we're just very happy to again have with us Catherine Gray, who is the SVP of Marketing and Sales Development with Independent Bank. Catherine, we'd love to hear from you. Turn your camera on. Let us hear from you.
Camera on? I think so. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to be here again today. I've attended each of these sessions, and I just have to say what an incredible series it's been. And we're so grateful to the Chamber for the opportunity to sponsor it. It's been wonderful to hear from so many business leaders and experts, and to learn what it means to exhibit leadership when it comes to equity and diversity, as well as how to encourage others to do so. In fact, we've been so inspired by each discussion that we followed each one up with a companion blog article related to the topic, as well as a link to that recording session, that session's recording. And if any of you are interested in reading those, you can find them on our website. And we also invite you to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, so that you can catch all our future blog posts. And that is my only plug for today. I want to thank all the panelists for being here and everyone in attendance. I hope everyone enjoys it. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Bobby.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We appreciate you. And again, we could not have done this if not for the support we've received from Independent Bank, providing us with this platform. Thank you all for the support. And you all have been so kind. So thank you again. Please give our regards to Susan.
No, thank you.
So at this time, I'm going to take a moment to introduce our panelists. I'm going to ask all of our panelists if they will turn their cameras on. And in no particular order, I will just mention that we have a group of individuals with us today who bring so much experience and context to the conversation. And actually, I should mention that our title of today's discussion is Getting Real About Supplier Diversity. So this is a pretty informal conversation with people who have worked in these areas and have a perspective that they bring. First, I would like to introduce to you Jozelle Booker, who leads as president and CEO of MWBE. And we're so grateful to them for their partnership and the long work Jozelle has done for our community. So much that we learn and have seen done in excellence kind of comes from what we've seen even over at MWBE with work that's been done there. And so much of that goes back to Jozelle and her history. I would like to also present to you Mark Yates, who is president of the Black Business Association of Memphis. Mark is a recovering banker, is how he puts it, but he's worked in financial services and government corporations and corporate environment as well, and brings a great bit of enthusiasm and perspective to the conversation. We also are happy to have Joyce Douglas. She manages the MWBE program with Shelby County Schools. She's previously worked with City of Memphis and worked very closely with helping to shape what supplier diversity looked like at the city, and what was at the time a historic increase in the numbers that were done in terms of MWBE spend by the city. And I would be remiss if not also giving great credit to the Strickland administration, Joanne Massey, who have built upon that foundation, and are very appreciative to them. And lastly, she is a phenom. I just can't say enough about Carolyn Harding, a serial entrepreneur, of course. She's done tremendously well in this marketplace and nationally. She's been the past chairwoman of the Greater Memphis Chambers Board, and she's just a remarkable personality. So we're very privileged to have all these individuals on the phone. But to start us off, I want to kind of pitch, if I will, to Jozelle Booker. Jozelle, are you there? We'd love to hear from you to begin us off. I know that there are so many misconceptions, and there are things that we find ourselves having to deal with and answer for when it comes to saying that there is support for MWBE, or minority and women-owned business enterprises. We hear so much and see so much, and I just love for you to take some time to share with those who are listening in what you view as some of the realities and misconceptions, if you will, that you like to address or speak to relative to MWBEs. Are you there?
I'm here. Glad to be here. I am thrilled to be a part of this conversation on this topic. Something that I live, very passionate about it. And the information and what I've decided to talk about today is what I call facts, or those things that I know for sure. And so I'm going to talk from this point of view, this slide that I'm going to share and speak from today. And so one of the things that I want to start off with is that I don't know how many people have heard this statistic, but there are over 40,000 minority businesses in the Memphis marketplace. Now that includes B2B, B2C, direct sellers, but there are over 40,000 businesses in this community. And as it relates to minority business utilization in the private sector, government sector, but in the B2B space, people's perceptions shape their realities. And what I mean by that is it depends on either an experience that you've had with a minority business owner or a woman-owned business owner. And if your view of minority businesses, if you start off and you begin from a position of minority businesses being deficient in certain areas, then if that perception is going to shape your reality, and it's also going to shape the level of engagement you have, the level of interaction, and the number and types of access to opportunities you provide to those business owners. Now, on the other hand, if you have had very positive engagements, if you are well aware that there are a number of business owners in this community that can provide goods and services to you, then you have a different perception. Therefore, your reality is going to be different, and you're going to respond and react and engage with those business owners differently. So I'd like us to just, think about what your perceptions are about doing business with those businesses, and then reflect on your own standards and how you engage based on your own individual perceptions and the realities that you have. And then if we move into dispelling myths. So there are certain myths in the marketplace, not just Memphis, but it could be nationally, as it relates to minority and women-owned businesses. And some of those myths deal with businesses' capability and capacity to serve corporate clients or government clients. And so when you think about businesses' capability, there are a number of industries where in order for those businesses to compete in the marketplace, those business owners have to be licensed by some state body or some licensing body. So when we start to think about the capabilities of businesses in this market, there are licensed contractors, there are certified public accountants, there are professional engineers, there are professional architects, there are real estate brokers, insurance brokers, and attorneys. And if we just look at that group of businesses in those industries, that's low-hanging fruit for anybody that's in the marketplace and you're looking to do business with minority businesses. So a misconception on capability, they were able to get the licensing and the certifications necessary to open their businesses so that we have businesses here that are capable. And then if we move into another area, as we talk about myths, is businesses that are ready, willing, and able. Ready, willing, and able is a defined term in the market where disparity studies are done. And we've had a number of paid consultants that have entered into this marketplace to perform disparity studies for governmental entities. And in order for that study to be completed, they had to identify and confirm that there were businesses ready, willing, and able to do business with those governmental entities in order for those studies to have been completed and for supplier diversity or minority participation programs to have been enacted. And the fact that we have these outside entities in our marketplace to come in and confirm the existence of those businesses, it means that those businesses have the necessary licensing, bonding, ability for insurance, and access to capital to be able to compete in the marketplace. So those are myths as it relates to the capacity and capability of minority businesses in this community. In addition to that, we have minority businesses in this community, members of MWBE and non-members across all industry sectors. So we're not heavy on one industry sector compared to another. But one thing that is definitely sure is that the majority of minority and women-owned businesses in this marketplace are underutilized. You heard me say we have over 40,000. And our spend that we're able to track or that our members report for 2019, self-reported spend was a little over $180 million with these member firms. And that's of about 25% reporting the spend that they have. So we, in my opinion, the myths and misconceptions about minority businesses are just that. We can easily remedy that if you just envision an easy button. The easy button is to provide access and opportunities to these businesses that are underutilized in their ability to provide goods and services to both government and the private sector. And just look at opportunities and explore opportunities to expand your supplier bases. And I think Memphis would be in a much better position as it relates to the utilization of minority and women-owned businesses.
Wonderful, Jozelle. Thank you so much for that. We're going to actually ask everyone to do this. Jozelle, as you transition out, we're going to transition over to Carolyn Hardy. Now, Carolyn, you know, honestly, there's just so much about your history and the challenges you have faced. Some of what Jozelle has even mentioned, you've seen it firsthand. I'd just love for you to just talk about what you have seen and experienced in terms of personally obstacles or things that have stood in the way of you personally being able to engage at certain levels. I just think there's so much to the story that you have to tell on so many levels. And even as I mentioned that, I ask you to turn your camera and your microphone on. I also will ask all of our folks who are listening in to share any questions you might have through the Q&A button. Please feel free to send that in, and we'll get to that when we come to nearer the end of our session with our kind of joint panel discussion. But with that said, Carolyn, love to hear from you at this point.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Bobby, thanks for that question. You know, that discussion is very near and dear to my heart. And the reason it's so near and dear to my heart, I follow how well our city is performing for MWBE statistically. And you think about the pandemic that's going on right now, and I relate the COVID-19 to the 2008 recession. Most people may not be aware, but the National Urban League reported that in 2008, when we went through that recession, women and minorities, especially minorities, lost about 30% of their wealth. We lost about 30% of our wealth. And my concern as I look at the statistics from the Federal Reserve and the pandemic, we're going to lose another 30% of our wealth. Now, what does that mean in terms of dollars and cents? Well, in 2009, when our wealth fell by 30%, the average household wealth for a Black was reduced to $5,677, while the average wealth of a white household was $113. And I want to put in another perspective. For every $20 that a white has, a black has $1. That's our wealth. In 2009, 24% of black households had no assets other than a car. 24% of our adult black households had only a car as an asset. While if you think about Memphis, almost 63% of our population is black. So the question that, Bobby, that you asked was, what are some of the barriers that black businesses are up against? Well, Jozelle said one, myths. There's a lot of myths that we deal with. There's a lot of bias and there's a lot of excuses. And I have a slide, if I know how to put it up, that would be a good idea. Let me see. If not, I will ask Amy to do it. Amy, you're on. I'm not doing a good job.
I can get it for you.
Okay. The myths, bias, and excuses that we talk about, one, it's not a myth. Black businesses lack access to working capital. Most black businesses will live off of a credit card, loans from families and friends, but rarely will have the assets or the working capital to really do the business right. So what's held against us is a customer will call and we'll lack the inventory, or we'll lack the ability to hold their AR for 30 to 60 days. A lot of major companies now have changed their payment terms, and they didn't ask the black business, could you afford it? They're telling us that the payment terms are 45 to 60 days. Now, small black businesses, that absolutely kills them, because if you've got to pay for your goods and services in 7 to 30 days, how in the world can you wait 45 to 60 days for your AR? I heard during an interview with a major group that black subcontractor skills are not equal. I asked the person who made that statement to explain to me what he meant by black subcontractor skills are not equal. He had had a bad experience in the last 30 years with a black subcontractor. And from that bad experience, he basically broad brushed every black contractor in the world to equal the one bad experience that he had. I've tried to help him understand that I've had bad experience with white subcontractors. But from my bad experience, I didn't assume that every white subcontractor that I meet had lacked skills. The challenge that we have, though, the myth that we're up against, is that if a white has one bad experience with a black subcontractor or a black retailer or a black anything, then all of a sudden the entire black race actually has that same subpar skill. That's a myth that somehow, or a bias, that they have to get over. Black businesses are not scalable. Again, major companies will feel or say or think that because they're experienced with one black company that couldn't grow, couldn't make the expenditure, or couldn't do the things they need to do, they'll assume that every black company is exactly the same. That's a major problem that I think that the community has to get over. Black businesses are not bondable. Well, everything we do doesn't have to be bondable. And I think that comment comes from a rule that TVA has. And it doesn't apply to everything that TVA does, but there's a lot of things that TVA does that requires you to carry a $10 million bond. Whether you're doing $5,000 worth of contracting business with them, and I'm talking construction type work, or 10,000 or 10 million, you still have to carry a $10 million bond. And that's a challenge that I think TVA is looking at, but we are bondable. But let's make bonding reasonable. The statement that I made about bonding, when we have to buy a supplier bond, which means that we have a contract from a GC or from a vendor for $3 million or $5 million, you only have to buy a $3 million or $5 million bond that's equal to that contract. You don't just arbitrarily pick $10 million. A $10 million bond doing $50,000 worth of business doesn't make good business sense. So we are bondable, but let's not put an arbitrary number out there that becomes a gatekeeper to keep us from doing business. During the same interview, this gentleman made the statement, I do business with my granddad's agents. Why change? He said, I do business with a lot of my granddad's people. Why change? I made the statement that when your granddad was around, Black businesses wasn't given the opportunity to do business in a lot of sectors. So the fact that you made the decision not to change, you may be missing out on better pricing, better service, just overall better opportunities. But it's a gatekeeper for us. If they've been doing business with someone for a long time, or they have a strong personal relationship with a group, then those doors are closed for us. We have to figure out, how do we open those doors, because it's really critical that we get into the majority's inner circle and they become comfortable with us. If we never build that strong relationship, they'll never do that big contract with us. And you know, that's a bias, and that's an excuse. It's not a myth. That's real. I have seen personal relationships, and I mean, I've had in construction fellow, people in the industry tell me that, oh no, I'm going to get that deal. I'm going to get that deal because I'm friends with so-and-so, so-and-so. Well, when I go in, I've got to bid on it. I've got to be price competitive. I've got to be service competitive. I've got to be quality competitive. I never get a pass. If you have a strong interpersonal relationship with the majority inner circle, then what that does is they tend to understand what's going on in the industry. So if you're late on something because the whole industry's late, they understand that the whole industry's late. Instead of saying, okay, you're late, these other 5 people are late, their excuses sound good, but your excuse is not acceptable. If you have a strong interpersonal relationship, you tend to get an okay and get a pass when things are not going exactly right. One of the challenges I see today is that the diversity programs in a lot of these major companies are totally ineffective. They're totally ineffective. The reason being is, if the CEO at the top does not embrace the program and require that there are goals put on the program and goals put on the manager's performance objective, then nothing's going to happen. We all know that what gets measured gets done. So if you say best efforts, and I've heard that stated in some of the EDGE programs, when we ask major companies coming in to get pilots, hey, we need you to require the company to have a 25% or 30% minority spend or women spend. And the contract will say, well, we don't want to definitely put that goal out there. We want to put a goal out there that says best efforts. To me, best efforts mean I'm not going to do it. We have got to make sure that these diversity programs have measurements, and that the managers who's leading these programs, their salary, their bonus, or whatever, or their jobs are put on the line if they don't hit these goals. But instead, what I see with most diversity programs in major companies today, best efforts. And that's all they're doing. When I see most programs and I see people talking about it, what I feel is that they're checking a box. They're basically saying, we have a chief diversity officer, we have a diversity program, and so we can check that box and we can move on to the next thing. Most chief diversity officers have no real authority. And so that's hurting us. Why put a program up there? Why put a position up there that's more of a camouflage when that position has authority to do nothing? In most cases, the chief diversity officer should report to the CEO. But what I've seen these positions watered down recently to where they're actually reporting to HR. Human resource has another priority. Their priority is not diversity. Chief diversity officers need to be independent. They need to have authority. They need to have the ear of the CEO. If they don't have that, then that program is just a checkbox as far as I'm concerned. The only way we're going to get rid of the biases, the excuses, and the myths is top down. That's the only way. If the CEO comes on and says he's went out and he met with his employees to talk about Black Lives Matter, to talk about how important women and minorities are, but he's not setting a goal, he's just checking his box for the day. If we don't insist that they put measurable goals out there, and when I say measurable goals, I want a goal for women, I want a goal for minority to be separate, because I have seen projects in this city, with an excuse, we said that one of the EDGE pilots, and I never can think of the name of the building that was built, had a 25% goal for women and minorities. Well, there was not one minority that worked on that project. And we found out later, after the fact, after the building, it was a Kia that was built. When a Kia was built, we were celebrating what an amazing job they did for MWBEs. But the only problem is they left the M out. Maybe somebody forgot to tell them that M meant minority, W meant women. They went only with the W. We have got to hold people accountable, and we've got to separate the M from the W if we really want to deal with the lack of equity and wealth for Blacks. Bobby, I hope that answers your question.
No, as always, Carolyn, I think that was wonderfully done. I'm going to ask you to transition out, and you'll come back with us in just a moment here. I'm going to now pitch it over to Joyce Douglas. She is the director, the manager of the MWBE program with Shelby County Schools. It's a relatively new program being shaped around a disparity study that was completed by Shelby County Schools not long ago. But I would love to hear from Joyce as she's shaping this program, and I'm listening intently to statements we've had and heard. You know, there are pitfalls you want to avoid, but there also is a kind of a foundational things you want to establish. So Joyce, love to hear from you right now about where you are, what your thoughts are as you're building out that program and just the road forward. Joyce,
Okay.
are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Bobby, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate today. With building out the Shelby County Schools MWBE program, the first layer of the program is the commitment from the top that we have. We have commitment from Shelby County Schools Board, and we also have commitment from Superintendent Dr. Ray. Dr. Ray placed this particular program, assigned it to Leon Patman. So Leon Patman, what he did, Chief Patman, he recruited a team with the passion to continue the build out of the program. With building a strong MWBE program, there's 3 elements: certification, monitoring, and outreach. Under certification, you want to make sure that you have firms within the program that are indeed eligible to participate in the program. Certification is really big as it relates to having an MWBE program, in addition to having a list of businesses. And we can talk more about that as we continue the conversation, but it's important for us to have that. And we also have that list located on our website of certified firms. The other part is monitoring. It's not enough just to set a goal on a project. We are building systems to ensure that when we place a goal on a project, that we're also tracking payments, actual payments, and we're reporting that those payments within our spend report. So I hear where people are coming from as it relates to where we are in the community with the program. But again, we're 10 months in with building this program out. And then the last part of a strong program is outreach. It's important that the community knows what's coming in advance of, in all honesty. So what we've done is we've posted forecast spend on Shelby County Schools MWBE website. So we have opportunities listed. We also are in the community. We have scheduled pre-MWBE certification workshops for each month. We have them scheduled for the remaining of this fiscal year. We've been meeting with contracting organizations and presenting opportunities. So we're committed, and we're thankful that we have the commitment from the leadership, from the top.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Joyce. You guys will recall that one of the sessions we even had was MWBE participation from the top. We had Scott Brockman and Joe Claiborne with the Airport Authority on, because as Carolyn has opined and mentioned, and as Joyce has highlighted, that is so important on getting anything done. We'll talk a little bit more about it in our Q&A session. Joyce, if you transition out, we're going to transition on the one and only Mark Yates, who's holding it down for all men on this call with the ladies. Mark, are you there? Why don't you turn your camera on there? I do want to pitch this to you, that as we had our tactical, the experience that you bring tactically and strategically, if there's any advice you could give, let's not talk about 20 years from now, but let's talk about some of the right now things on the private sector side, the corporations that are attempting to do better. We've talked around pieces of things that could be done, but love to hear you give a little bit more insight about what you think could be done, in the short term for corporations and companies that are looking to strengthen the number or span with MWBE. Mark, are you there?
I'm here. Can we hear me? Can you
Absolutely.
hear me? Okay, great. Well, thank you for having us, Bobby, and greetings to everybody on the Zoom, and greetings to all of my dear friends and panelists here, all the lovely ladies. So the most comfortable way for me to talk about this, in terms of the question, Bobby, that you framed out, is to think through in terms of a balance sheet. As you just laid it out there, and looking at a balance sheet for an organization, for a company, for an enterprise, and saying, okay, you've got an opportunity because it's a snapshot in time, meaning it depicts what is happening right now. It doesn't look back in the past. It doesn't look in the future. But if you look at that snapshot, we have the opportunity, this rare opportunity, really to provide not only one pivot, but two pivots. And those pivots for organizations, and I'll speak of companies as organizations, for organizations today, if they can think of strategy and tactics, and tactic meaning short term, what are you doing as an organization to pivot, one, with respect to COVID-19 and how you're adjusting your business operations and what that's going to mean for revenues, for your expenses, for earnings, and then thinking through that, but also thinking through with all the racial strife and those other set of circumstances that we have happening in our country and in our world. How are you pivoting there? So we've got two different axis points that are coming together or converging at the same point in time. And so you think about that. So you've got business and business opportunity, and we'll speak of problems as opportunity, but you also have this related to, as my colleagues were saying here on the call, as Carolyn Hardy was indicating, you've got chief diversity officers, and where has the teeth been for affecting changes, both at whether it's been at a board level, whether it's been at a C-suite level, or if it's been throughout an organization, if we're thinking about that. And I'm speaking primarily based upon organizations and how organizations, and that translates into the opportunities that are available if we look at doing business with organizations that are run by minorities, Black people. Because I run an organization that has Black in the title, I use the term Black. So for Black people, and I want to just now look specifically, there's one thing I want to talk about from the organization standpoint. I was lucky enough that Fred Keaton, a dear friend of mine out in Las Vegas, he sent me what's called the Inclusion Index Snapshot Report. It's this morning. So I was thinking about the comments that we were going to share, and Fred sent this over. So it gave me exactly what we needed to talk about. It's diversity best practices, and how do you measure those best practices? So if we're speaking to CFOs in organizations, my bosses were CFOs and CEOs when I worked in corporate structures. If you're looking at your balance sheet and then looking at forecasting out into the future, how do you say, okay, what am I doing and how do I measure myself against peers? Again, we were talking about peer companies, and this index, this has 51 different companies, and this Inclusion Index Snapshot has 51 different companies and how they look at diversity and inclusion. And there's several metrics that they use, including recruitment, retention, employee resource impact, advancement, corporate culture, structure, transparency, and demographics. I'll give you one example of transparency. There's an anecdote where a corporation began to post based upon gender and race, what the percentage of the raise or the incremental amount of raises that employees were making. They made those items public. Well, over a period of time, they were able to flatten out the discrepancy between what white employees were receiving versus what black employees were receiving because of the transparency. It was egregious. You had people doing the same exact job. It wasn't based upon individuals, but it was based upon the mean and the statistics. So you've got 51 organizations, and if you're looking to say, okay, what can we do at this point in time to increase our earnings or increase morale, increase what we're doing, and it starts, of course, as all things do, at the board level. And how are organizations really interested in moving the needle? Jozelle made the comment. She said that we have locally. Let's deal with every, as it's once been said, all politics are local. Well, all business is local too. So if we've got 40,000 businesses, according to the 2012 census, that are minority, there are 39, I know, that are black, according to 2012 census. And you look at the amount of wealth, I think we were also mentioning how much wealth or how much in earnings is being sucked out of those households based upon that. That's equates to between 205 to about $2 billion because of COVID-19. That's money that's not coming into our economy, our local economy. So at the corporate community can really do a really good job of reassessing how do we put teeth back into these measures and what are those things we do. So I'll leave it there for now when I think about that.
Thanks so much for that, Mark. I really appreciate that and those comments. I'm going to ask all of our panelists to turn their cameras on. We are going to kind of walk through this next part with the questions that we receive and some clarity we'd love people to be able to give. I want to put this out there because it's a conversation that I think is worthy to be had. Let's talk on the private sector side. We know on the public sector side, I've often said, on the public sector side, you kind of know where those pressure points are. You have a elected legislative body and an elected administrative body, or a person who leads in those ways, or there's the input that is welcomed in a lot of ways. Even on the quasi-governmental side, you pretty much have that. But I want to ask this relative to what was mentioned by, I believe it was Carolyn, performance objectives. In terms of measurements and what needs to be done on the performance objective side. Could you say more about how you see accountability, what it needs to look like on the private sector side for us to see what we want to see with MWBE expansion?
Bobby, when I was a vice president with Coors, MWBE goals was a very important part of my performance objectives. In my performance plan, it included hiring objectives. So if my department or my facility, the mix of top leadership, professional leadership did not match the community in which we served, then I was dinged on that. So I had to set goals every year. So my goals in Memphis, Tennessee would look very different than the goals of my counterpart in Shenandoah, Virginia, because the goals need to represent your community. So that goal was set. Now, what happened if I did not meet my goal? If I did not meet my hiring goal, if I didn't meet my purchasing goal, and let me talk about the purchasing side. This was back in 2001. And, I was the vice president for Coors, so you're talking almost $1 billion division. We would buy chemicals, and we were buying $10, $20 million at times on things. And, to find a black vendor, I'll use Mark's term, I won't get confused either, to find a black vendor who could actually perform at that level is not easy. But my company accepted no excuses. So in order for me to meet my performance objective, I may have to bring in a black vendor that I made a few concessions for. One, if I had a $10 million contract, we may start off at $2 or $3 million. We wouldn't go the whole 10 because it was still my responsibility to make sure that that facility got the chemicals that they needed to run the beer. And so we would start off at a level, but my goal was always, how do I continue to grow my Black vendors? And I tell you, we would do concessions like Coors was one of those organizations that paid in 30 to 45 days. So I was allowed to go to the company and actually get a 15-day payment rule just for the Black vendor. Now that wasn't going to stay forever. It was one that they had to graduate out of that program. But if I did not meet my objective, then I didn't get a bonus. It was, you know, 25% of my bonus. And I think that it makes it real when you have to pay forward. We were required to even have a certain amount of minority participation in the advertising we're doing in the community. That's how I met Tina Burchett. We actually advertised in her magazine. We worked with the Southern Heritage Trust. There wasn't a whole lot of things that we could do in the community, but I had to report out to Leo Connolly, the CEO of the Memphis facility, doing. And if Carolyn Hardy didn't achieve it, then I paid for it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Carolyn. I think that really speaks to, you know, the type of lever being in place that's so important. I want to ask this. We've talked about this. Go ahead, Carolyn.
But doesn't that also demonstrate that the CEO is serious? You know, my position on setting measurable goals, and I said this in the Chairman Circle group years ago, is that we set goals as companies in terms of where we want to be. You know, we want the company to grow. FedEx want to grow at 10%. IP wants to grow. AutoZone wants to grow. Everybody wants to grow at a certain percent. And if you don't hit those growth targets and let that happen a couple of years, those VPs are gone. And let them go. Am I right? If we're serious about diversity, I would like to see a similar type incentive or disincentive put in place for our goals. Enough said.
Bobby, can I make a comment?
Sure, please.
So what Carolyn described and what I don't want to get lost is the partnership and the integration of responsibility between supplier diversity and procurement. So procurement plays a major role in any organization's supplier diversity success. And sometimes what happens is the accountability, the focus, everything is on the supplier diversity person.
Right.
But it's the people in procurement that have these long-term relationships that Carolyn mentioned about someone wanting to say, I've always done business with this person. It's that interconnectability. And so the CEO at the top and the person that's driving the accountability, we cannot lose the responsibility and the accountability of the purchasing team. Because in most instances, the supplier diversity individuals are tracking performance, they're doing outreach, but it's the people in purchasing that's doing the spending. And so as we look at these programs, as we look at this work, the people in purchasing have a huge role and responsibility, and their accountability definitely should be shared with the supplier diversity individuals.
That's brilliant, beautiful. I mean, and that speaks to, again, you know, the influence from the top, and you know, because I think that one of the things is that we've got to be careful about is programs that have great names, but that the persons who lead those areas are, it's understood that, you know, you can give a little lip service to them and then go on about your way because there won't be any repercussions for not meeting goals that are set. With that said, I want to talk about another thing, and I'd love to hear from just any of you all. You know, we've used this term gatekeepers, and it's a term that I'd love to hear more about, because sometimes you find that there are those middle managers. I know, Joyce, you have experience with this and can recall that in other divisions in government, is many times is not the top person, it's middle management folks who at a certain level are keeping things as they have remained, relationships that have gone back 20 years, they're still in in place. Carolyn, you made a reference to it regarding somebody who's staying with the granddad was the one who made the relationships, and we're still using the same folks. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, you know, who those people are and how an organization should solve for that. Because I would dare say many CEOs or people who lead organizations have no idea how their MWBE numbers are being held up by middle management folks who are telling their bosses that, hey, nothing can be done when in fact something can be done.
Well, you know, Bobby, gatekeepers are not just people, but in most cases they are people. There are people that are put in place to keep things as they are, but sometimes requiring a organization to have a bond at $10 million, that's a gatekeeper. Because anything that keeps you from moving forward acts as a gatekeeper. Requiring a company, I've had organizations say, well, let me see your financials. When I owned Hardy Bottling, I had a beverage company says, well, tell me who loaned you your money for your business. I said, what? They were trying to think of anything to keep me from getting that contract. So a gatekeeper is anything that stops you from participating in the upside of a contract, something that you can't solve for. So that can be almost anything. In most cases, it is people, but in a lot of cases, it can be things. And so, Jozelle, don't forget to mention later, you said something early that I really wanted people to hear when you and I were talking a few days ago. You also talked about culture. You know how important changing the culture is. And when you look at gatekeeping, one way to remove gatekeepers is that you have to change the culture of the company to where everybody understands that what you're doing is what's expected from the top down, and there's no excuse or exception for not making it happen.
Exactly. An example of a gatekeeper, in my opinion, other than a person, is a portal.
Right.
I attended a large national conference a couple of years ago, and a lot of the people were there were supplier diversity people. And from booth after booth that we visited, they had cards, and the cards it was the supplier diversity department, and you email supplier diversity @ no phone number. So if you're a minority in business walking up to the table, they give you that card and they direct you to their portal. There's no person to contact. And it's a way to say, yes, we're here. We have this huge booth. We've made a large investment. And if you want to do business with us, you go to this portal. There's no person's name and there's no phone number. So that's, in my opinion, an example of a gatekeeper. It's not engaging.
They check the box. They check the box.
Yeah, and so Carolyn, you talk about culture. You know, I've been working in this supplier diversity space forever, since 1997, and started at a utility company that had a culture that was driven by relationships. There were all kinds of myths about minority businesses that had to be dispelled about how they worked. And changing that culture over time to one where you're inclusive. If you create an environment or you have an environment that is not inclusive, it's going to be very hard to put in place the supplier diversity program, because just think about it, on its face, supplier diversity refers to the vendor base, the supplier base. And you're saying you want to diversify the suppliers. When I was hired as a supplier diversity officer for MWBE, the president at the time said to me, young lady, I want our suppliers to look like our customers.
Right.
We serve everybody in Shelby County, and any business in Shelby County should have an opportunity to bid on jobs and contracts. And so then that goes to inclusiveness. So you build out your programs and you create an inclusive culture within your organization. From your door being open, you answer questions regardless to what kind of question it is. You create a welcoming, opening environment, sharing access to opportunities, and trying to making sure that everybody across the organization understands what it is that's trying to be achieved. And I want to say one other thing about supplier diversity and, you know, understanding what it's really, really, really about. If we, across this community, corporate or public, if we are creating supplier diversity programs, we are not building sustainability, because a program can be discontinued.
Right.
New leaders can come in and say, I don't like that program. I don't agree with that program. We're not going to fund that program. We're going to go in a different direction. So if you build that, it can be wiped away with the sweep of a pen. We do not need supplier diversity programs. What we need integrated business processes that are inclusive. And when you do that, if the program goes away or the person goes away, you have institutionalized inclusiveness. You have institutionalized everything that is necessary in order to allow minority and women businesses access to those procurement opportunities. And you have built out systems that allow that supplier diversity initiative to become a part of the organizational structure of that business. And I say that I know that works for sure, because that is exactly what was done at MLGW. And so it's a part of the business. It goes through the ERM system. It's built into everything that organization does. And if you want to sustain an inclusive culture and an environment where minority and women businesses have access to those opportunities, it must be integrated throughout the business processes and systems of that organization, or else it can be wiped away with the sweep of a pen.
Jozelle, let me tell you, that those words from you got so good to one of our attendees. They typed the words amen in response to your words. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I want to, Joyce and Mark, I wanted to kind of ask you all this. I got asked a question, and this is from someone who in her own right has done so much in the area, in this area, but she's concerned about what she's heard relative to how entities and organizations continue to get credit for the W as opposed to the B, with those numbers not being broken up. And what are y'all's thoughts on what best practices and what organizations need to do, and how we can change that narrative on ensuring that we know more specifically what is BBE versus what is, for instance, white woman-owned business enterprises seeing growth that is not spread across the MWBE, if you will.
Bobby, for us over at Shelby County Schools, our reporting, we built our report to break out the M and the W. And under the M, we have the various, we have African American, Hispanic American, Native American, all of that's broken out in our spend report. So is that what you're talking about? Or you're talking about on the
It is, it is, but I'm sorry, it's really just so simple that it's sometimes surprising to know that is not universally being done. And so, it's almost like sometimes we're having to return to elementary things to ensure that elementary things are not disregarded. But I just say it's still surprising to know that is still being done, to your point, Carolyn, that you made. But yes, I mean, that's exactly it.
What do you
Joyce,
mean? You mean like some organizations don't report out that way?
Well, the fact that when it comes to reporting, that we don't always see it broken out this way. And then when it comes to what was done on projects, we still don't necessarily see it broken out this way across the board. This isn't to say that it's, right, normally done, but even if it's an exception, obviously it's somewhat of an issue based on some of the conversations I've even heard recently regarding it. So yeah, but what y'all do should be the industry standard at some level. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to mention or add? I apologize.
I'll be gentle here. you can look at, if you're looking at the breakout between M and W, the minority piece, you know, it's no secret in the world that, you know, women have been probably some of the most, you know, highly beneficial recipients of civil rights movements in terms of, and I'm talking specifically about white women in terms of their businesses and the efforts that have come along with that. So as you start to parse it down, you can say you know, who is it important to, and and why is it important? Why is it important? Are you trying to achieve a certain goal and to achieve economic development and or growth for, you know, a specific class, or are you you know, are you just trying to meet the letter of the law, or the letter of the rule, if you will? So that's how you have to think. You have to think about the intent, because people will figure out ways to get around, shirk, whatever you want to call it, whatever the requirements. And you can never write a policy, you know, stringent enough to effectively nail it all down. So it comes back to the spirit of what people are trying to achieve. So I'll leave it there. Jozelle, I know you, this is what y'all deal with all day, every day. So I wanted, as I said, I wanted to be gentle with this one because, yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think the question started out being goals that are bundled. The reporting is bundled. And so I go back to, if an organization or an entity states that they cannot break out or separate the spending, and they can't say, even to the point where they can look at the MBE spend and be able to report how much money was spent with each ethnic group within the MWBE spend, if their program is integrated throughout their organization, then as they are building that program, the IT group, regardless of what type of ERM system they use, based on what you want to capture, you build it that way, or you go back in and you modify it. So it could be an excuse that they cannot be bundled in, but maybe the numbers are not where they would like them to be if they're shared publicly. And so to me, that's an incentive and a motivation to improve their reporting and their spend in certain areas. You know, and when you look at, there are 5 different types of certifications that are available that are used by entities in this market. And so if systems are built to where you can capture data, because everything is automated, then if you do that, integrating and institutionalize it across the organizations, we should be able to capture and report any type of data and spending.
Yeah. And let me say this conversation has been so good. I have not been paying attention to time at all. And we have creeped up on one. I mean, this is, honestly, I will tell you folks that with folks like we have on this line, these are the types of conversations that are had as we try to problem solve. I did not even get to the need for an ecosystem and how we began to look at metrics across the ecosystem and look at where we need to go to build out or add capacity, or what possibly needs to be replaced because it's not working. But ecosystem, we have not even had that conversation, but we're gonna have to get there.
Right.
Because as people are asking questions and businesses are at different levels of development, we need to say, where can you go to get support? And we need to look at what that ecosystem is across all of our organizations, across all of our entities, across funding, and figure that thing out for the folks in this area in service to MWBEs. I'm going to leave that there because we're right at the 1 p.m. and that's my soapbox moment. But I wanted to at least give it over to Madam President. Beverly Robertson is actually on the line. I know she had a previous board meeting she had to be on, but Beverly, we'd love for you to say any final words to close this conversation out, and quite frankly, to close out what I think has been a pretty informative 5-part series. Beverly, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Bobby. First of all, let me tell you, you guys are brilliant. If you guys just take it together collaboratively, and develop the strategy, create the ecosystem, and then just give it to the business community. That would be the solution to the problem. The problem would be, would they execute it? And that is always the problem. But this has been such an informative session in many ways when we're dealing with issues like that, because I know, Bobby, you must have gotten more questions that could have been asked of these panelists. Because
yes.
I know you did. I know you did. And this issue has been waging. Carolyn, how long have we been in business?
Too long.
For as long as I have been in business. I've been in business as trust marketing for almost 30 years. And I'm going to tell you something. We've been talking about it for 30 years. We've been trying to figure it out for 30 years. But frankly, it's not that difficult. It is not that difficult. It is all about the will to do it. If you don't have the will, it will never be done. It seems that there seems to be some will, but we better step into that space right now and get it done. We don't have time to tarry. We don't have time to wait. And you know that soon that window is closing. Right. So whatever we can do now, and let me just thank you, Mark and Joyce, Jozelle, thank you, your presence always. Carolyn, you know, we sort of are tied together in many ways. I know Alandis is on the line and a lot of other business leaders, but it's something that we have all got to embrace, wrap our arms around, and get some firm solutions that have metrics associated with them so that we will know what people are doing. You inspect what you inspect what you expect. And if you don't inspect it, you're not gonna keep getting it. That's just the bottom line. Look, thank you all for joining us. Bobby, thank you. Panelists, I love you guys. We'll probably bring you back now at some point in time because this information is really so critical to the success of the businesses that are listening in today. We appreciate you. I'll be talking to many of you, so please take care. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.